He saw his father, Chairman Kwan, standing there on the cracked pavement, and the world stopped. Not a metaphorical halt, but a genuine, heart-stopping, breath-stealing cessation of all things. The old man, immaculate in a tailored wool coat that cost more than the car Maya drove, was speaking to her. He was speaking to Maya, and next to her, clutching her hand, was her son, Leo, his small face tilted up at the imposing figure of a man who moved through life like a shark through water. Jinwoo did not think. He did not strategize. He did not weigh the consequences. He simply ran. His polished Italian leather shoes that had walked across priceless oriental rugs in penthouses and scuffed against concrete in forgotten warehouses, pounded against the gritty sidewalk. The sound was a frantic drumbeat against the sudden roaring silence in his ears. He saw the slight, polite incline of his father's head, a gesture of condescending curiosity that Jinwoo knew was more dangerous than a drawn blade. He saw the confusion on Maya's face, her brow furrowed, her grip tightening on her son's hand. Protective. Always so protective. It was one of the first things he had loved about her. He ran. He ran past the bodega with its faded awning, past the fire hydrant someone had painted to look like a minion, past the life that was hers and not his. He was a creature of shadow and steel, thrust into her world of sunlight and struggle, and his very presence here, now, was a contamination. His father's presence was a plague. "Father," he said, his voice a harsh rasp. He did not shout. He never had to shout. The word was a weapon in itself, sharp and cold. Chairman Kwan turned his head slowly, his placid expression unchanging. It was the expression he wore when he sentenced a man to ruin or ordered a betrayal, a terrifying calm. "Jinwoo, I was just having a pleasant conversation with this charming young woman." And her son. The old man's eyes, dark chips of obsidian, flickered down to Leo. It was not a glance. It was an appraisal, a branding. Jinwoo moved, placing himself squarely between them, a human shield. He was taller than his father, broader in the shoulders, but in that moment he felt like a boy again, facing down an ancient, unmovable force. He looked at Maya, his gaze desperate, trying to convey a universe of apology and terror in a single second. Her eyes, wide and startled, met his. The confusion was hardening into something else, fear. The one thing he had sworn he would never let her feel because of him. "Get in the car," his father commanded softly, his voice a silken threat directed at his own driver, who stood rigidly by the gleaming black sedan. But Jinwoo's world had narrowed to the woman in front of him, to the look in her eyes. "Go inside, Maya," he urged, his voice low and strained. "Lock the door. Please." She hesitated, her gaze flicking from him to the old man, a flicker of understanding dawning in her expression. This was it. This was the world he had tried to hide from her. It had found her anyway. It had found her on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 months earlier. Jinwoo Kwan did not believe in fate. Fate was a lazy excuse for a lack of planning. He believed in leverage, information, and the decisive application of force. Yet, when he saw her, the foundations of his cold, orderly world cracked. He was in a greasy spoon diner in a part of the city his driver had looked distinctly nervous to enter. The meeting was with a low-level distributor who was getting ambitious. It was a tedious affair, a piece of administrative tidying that required his personal touch only because the man was a distant cousin of a rival family, and appearances had to be maintained. His second-in-command, Min-jun, sat opposite him, silent and watchful, a ghost in a sharp suit. The air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and frying onions. Jinwoo hated it. He hated the sticky vinyl of the booth, the chipped formica tabletop, the buzzing fluorescent light overhead that made his head ache. He was mentally composing a list of the man's transgressions and the appropriate, proportionate response when a voice cut through his thoughts. "More coffee, handsome?" He looked up, and the world, for the first time, tilted on its axis. She was not beautiful in the way the women in his world were beautiful. The women he knew were sculpted, polished, and curated. Their beauty was a statement of wealth and status, as carefully constructed as the stock market portfolios of their fathers and husbands. This woman, she was just real. Her hair was pulled back in a simple, functional ponytail, a few stray curls escaping to frame a face that was etched with a tiredness he could see even under the poor lighting. She had high cheekbones, a full mouth that was currently quirked in a half-smile of professional courtesy, and eyes. Her eyes were the color of warm honey, and they held a universe of resilience. She was wearing a faded pink uniform that had seen better days, and a small stain marred the front of her apron. Jinwoo stared. He forgot the ambitious distributor. He forgot Min Jun. He forgot the entire sordid reason he was sitting in this miserable diner. He just stared. It was a frozen moment, a sliver of time that stretched into an eternity. He saw her entire story in that single glance. The struggle, the pride, the fierce independence that kept her shoulders straight despite the weariness in her posture. He felt a pull, a strange magnetic force he had never experienced. It was not lust. It was something deeper, something that resonated in the hollow, lonely chambers of his own heart. She shifted her weight, the coffee pot in her hand suddenly looking heavy. The half-smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of unease. "Sir? Coffee?" Jinwoo's voice felt thick in his throat. "Yes." She poured, her movements efficient. Her knuckles were slightly red, her nails short and unpolished, working hands. He watched the dark liquid fill his cup, his gaze tracing the line of her wrist, the slight tensing of her forearm. He was a man who noticed details, the twitch of an eye that signaled a lie, the sweat on an upper lip that betrayed fear. Now, all his powers of observation were focused on the simple, graceful arc of her arm. "There you go," she said, her voice a little cooler now. The professional warmth was gone, replaced by a cautious neutrality. She had felt his stare. Of course she had. It was as subtle as a searchlight. She turned to leave. "Wait," he said, the word sharper than he intended. She stopped, turning back, her eyebrows perfectly arched, lifted in a silent question. There was a hint of defiance there now, a spark. He had nothing to say. His mind, usually a cold, calculating machine, was blank. "What is your name? Where are you from? What sorrows have put that exhaustion in your eyes?" The questions were a frantic, silent clamor in his head. "Your name," he managed, the words feeling clumsy and foreign on his tongue. Her expression shuddered. The defiance solidified. "I'm your waitress. Is there something wrong with the service?" A smile touched Min Jun's lips for a fraction of a second before he erased it. The distributor across the table looked confused. "No," Jinwoo said. "The service is fine." He felt a strange, unfamiliar heat creeping up his neck. He, who could make grown men weep with a single quiet sentence, was being flustered by a waitress in a cheap diner. "Ah, great," she said, her tone clipped. "Enjoy the coffee." And she walked away, her back straight, the worn-out soles of her sneakers squeaking softly on the linoleum. Jinwoo watched her go, a feeling akin to a punch to the chest leaving him breathless. He didn't know who she was, but he knew, with an unnerving, absolute certainty, that he was going to find out. "Min Jun," he said, his voice low, his eyes still fixed on the swinging door to the kitchen. "Sir? The meeting is over. Our friend here has been given his final warning." He pushed a thick envelope across the table without looking at the distributor. "And find out everything there is to know about her." Maya Williams hated Tuesdays. Tuesdays were a double shift at the diner, followed by a frantic bus ride to her second job cleaning offices downtown, a job that left her hands raw and her back screaming. Tuesdays were for survival. That particular Tuesday had been stranger than most. It was because of him, the man in the booth. She had seen men like him before, but only in movies. He was devastatingly handsome, with sharp, aristocratic features, dark hair that fell perfectly across his forehead, and eyes so intense she felt they could see right through her. He wore a suit that probably cost more than her rent for 6 months, and he radiated an aura of quiet, dangerous power that didn't belong among the cracked vinyl and formica. His stare had been unnerving. It wasn't the usual lecherous once-over she got from truckers or the bored appraisal from businessmen. It was focused, predatory, but also something else, something that looked almost like recognition. It had unsettled her to her core. When he asked for her name, every alarm bell in her head went off. Men like him didn't ask for names like hers unless they wanted something, and what they wanted was usually trouble. Her life had no room for trouble. Her life had room for Leo, her 6-year-old son, and the constant grinding hustle to keep their small world afloat. That was it, so she gave him the brush off. It was a reflex, a defense mechanism honed by years of navigating the world as a woman alone. You build walls, you keep your head down, you don't engage with men who look like they could break you without even trying. She tried to forget him, but for the rest of her shift, she felt his eyes on her. Even when he was ostensibly talking to the greasy-looking man across from him, she felt the weight of his attention. It was a physical pressure, a prickling on the back of her neck that made her drop a fork and spill coffee on a customer's table. By the time she clocked out, her nerves were frayed. She rushed to the bus stop, her mind already on Leo, who was with her neighbor, Mrs. Gable, a kind retiree who watched him for a pittance. Maya hated leaving him, hated that she was missing these precious years, trading them for hours spent wiping down tables and scrubbing toilets. But there was no choice. There was never a choice. Her best friend, Chloe, called while she was on the bus. "So, how was the day from hell?" Chloe's voice was a welcome comfort. "The usual," Maya sighed, leaning her head against the grimy window. "Plus, one weird, creepy, ridiculously hot guy who might be a mobster." Chloe laughed. "Ooh, details. My mobster or your mobster?" Chloe's taste ran towards flashy, loud types. Maya didn't have a type. She hadn't had the time or energy for a man in years. "Definitely not yours. Quiet, intense. Stared at me like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Asked for my name. And you told him to get lost, I assume." "Is the sky blue?" Maya retorted, a small smile finally touching her lips. "That's my girl. You don't need that kind of drama. Rich guys are a whole other species of trouble." "I know," Maya thought. "I know." The words were a familiar litany. She knew. But as the bus rattled on, she couldn't shake the image of his dark, piercing eyes. And for a fleeting, foolish moment, she wondered what would have happened if she had told him her name. Jin-woo returned to the diner the next day, and the day after that. He sat in the same booth, always alone now, always ordering a single cup of black coffee that he never finished. He would read reports on a tablet, his expression impassive, but Maya knew he was watching her. She could feel it. The other waitresses buzzed about him, the handsome mystery man. They vied to take his table, but he would always politely, firmly insist on waiting for her. It was becoming a problem. Her boss, a perpetually stressed man named Sal, was thrilled with the high-class clientele. Maya was terrified. On the third day, she confronted him. She marched to his table, her order pad held like a shield. "Look," she said, her voice low and tight. "I don't know what this is, but it's making me uncomfortable. You need to stop." He looked up from his tablet, his intense gaze meeting hers. There was no surprise in his eyes. He had been expecting this. "I apologize if my presence is unsettling. That is not my intention." His voice was a low, smooth baritone. It was the kind of voice that could soothe or command with equal ease. "What is your intention?" she shot back. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks a lot like stalking. This is creepy. Is it legal?" A ghost of a smile played on his lips. It was a devastatingly attractive smile, a fact that annoyed her immensely. "My intentions are to have a cup of coffee and, hopefully, to have a conversation with you. We're having one now. It's over. Find a new coffee shop." "There are no other coffee shops where you work," he stated simply, as if it were the most logical thing in the world. Maya felt a surge of frustration. He was impossible. He wasn't aggressive or lewd, he was just there, immovable. Why? She asked, exasperated. Why me? He considered the question for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face. I'm not entirely sure myself, he admitted, and the honesty in his tone caught her off guard. I saw you and I felt I needed to know you. It was the strangest, most unnerving compliment she had ever received, a smile like a punch to the chest. It left her breathless and off balance. She didn't know how to fight that. Sarcasm was her weapon against unwanted advances, but this wasn't a typical advance. It was something quieter, stranger, and far more potent. I'm a single mom working 2 jobs, she said flatly, trying to scare him off with the unvarnished, unglamorous truth of her life. I have a 6-year-old son. I don't have time for whatever this is. I know, he said softly. The 2 words landed like stones in the pit of her stomach. You know? Your name is Maya Williams. Your son is Leo. You live at 1452 Easton Drive, apartment 3B. You work here from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., and then you clean the offices of Sterling and Finch downtown from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. Your son stays with Eleanor Gable while you work. The coffee pot she was holding suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The blood drained from her face. This wasn't creepy anymore. This was terrifying. This was a violation. How? She whispered, her voice trembling. How do you know that? His expression was pained. He looked genuinely regretful. I have resources. I told you, I wanted to know you. I did not mean to frighten you. You didn't mean to frighten me? Her voice rose, laced with disbelief and fury. You dug into my life. You found out where I live, where my son is. That's not a cute romantic gesture, you psycho. That is the dictionary definition of frightening. He flinched, the word psycho hitting him with visible force. Maya, please. No, she said, her voice shaking with rage. Don't you, Maya, me. Stay away from me. Stay away from my son. If I see you again, I'm calling the police. She slammed the coffee pot down on the table, the hot liquid sloshing over the side. She didn't care. She turned and fled to the relative safety of the kitchen, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Jinwoo watched her go, a cold dread washing over him. He had made a catastrophic error. He had used the tools of his world, information, surveillance, to try and get closer to her, and in doing so, he had revealed himself as the very monster she feared. He had treated her like a target, a problem to be solved with data, not a woman to be wooed. The self-deprecating thought was bitter. He, the heir to the Golden Dragons, a man who navigated a world of treachery and violence, had no idea how to talk to a woman he admired. He had pushed too hard, too fast. He had confirmed her worst suspicions. He stood up, leaving a $100 bill on the table for a coffee he hadn't drunk. As he walked out of the diner, the smell of grease and her righteous anger clinging to him, he knew he couldn't go back. Not like this. He had to find another way, a better way, a way that proved he was not the threat she believed him to be. The opportunity came a week later, born from misfortune. Her misfortune. He knew about it, of course. Min-jun's reports were ruthlessly efficient. Mrs. Gable, Leo's elderly babysitter, had fallen and broken her hip. She was hospitalized, leaving Maya in an impossible position. She couldn't afford a proper daycare, and she couldn't miss work. She was patching together a desperate solution with other neighbors, but it was unstable, stressful, and falling apart. Jinwoo's first instinct was to solve it. He could have a state-licensed nanny at her door in an hour, paid for a year in advance. He could buy the daycare center down the street and give her son a free lifetime membership. He could solve the problem with a single phone call and a wire transfer. He knew, from the look of horror on her face in the diner, that this would be the worst possible thing he could do. It would be another show of overwhelming, terrifying power. It would be him buying his way into her life. So he did something he hadn't done in a very long time. He acted not as Jin Woo Kwon, the heir, but simply as a man. He found out which hospital Mrs. Gable was in. He went there, not in his tailored suit, but in jeans and a simple black sweater, clothes he had to send Min Jun out to buy because he didn't actually own any. He felt like he was in costume. He found Maya in the dreary hospital waiting room, her face buried in her hands. She looked smaller than he remembered, overwhelmed by the sterile, impersonal grief of the place. Her shoulders were shaking. He approached her slowly, his footsteps quiet on the polished floor. "Maya." She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and startled. When she saw him, her expression hardened instantly. "I told you to stay away from me." "I know," he said gently. "I'm not here for you. I'm here for Mrs. Gable." Her eyes narrowed in suspicion. "You don't know her." "I know she took care of your son. I know she was kind to him, and I know her insurance is not very good." He slid a thick envelope onto the table beside her. It was not filled with cash. It was a folder. "This is the name of the best orthopedic surgeon in the city, and this is a cashier's check made out to the hospital to cover the full cost of her surgery and rehabilitation. It is all handled anonymously. No one will know where it came from." Maya stared at the folder as if it were a snake. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you were kind to her, so she was kind to your son. And it is the right thing to do," he said simply. He looked at her, his gaze direct and stripped of all its earlier intensity. He tried to fill it with sincerity, with apology. "I am not the man you think I am, Maya. I handled our introduction poorly. I frightened you, and for that, I am truly sorry. I only want a chance to start over, to have that cup of coffee, properly this time." He didn't wait for an answer. He turned and walked away, leaving the folder on the table. He left the choice entirely in her hands. It was the first time he had ever willingly relinquished control, and it was the most terrifying, liberating thing he had ever done. Maya sat there for a long time staring at the folder. Her mind was a whirlwind of suspicion and a desperate, burgeoning hope. This wasn't a show of force. It was a show of kindness. A targeted, impossibly extravagant kindness, but kindness nonetheless. He hadn't tried to solve her problem. He had solved Mrs. Gable's. It was a subtle, crucial difference. She opened the folder. It was all there, just as he'd said. The surgeon's name, a consultation already scheduled, the check for an amount that made her head spin. It was all anonymous, a donation from a hospital benefactor. He had given her plausible deniability. He had given her a way to accept the help without feeling like she was being bought. A week later, after Mrs. Gable was out of a successful surgery and resting comfortably, Maya sent him a text message. Her fingers trembled as she typed. "1 cup of coffee, at the park, not the diner." His reply came back almost instantly. "Tomorrow at noon. I'll bring the coffee." That coffee in the park turned into a walk. The walk turned into another. They met in neutral spaces, public places where she felt safe. He never pushed. He never pried. He simply talked. He told her about his childhood, a lonely existence in a cavernous house, raised by tutors and staff. He spoke of a suffocating sense of duty to a family business he described only as complex and demanding. He was careful, omitting the darkness, but she could feel it there, a vast, shadowy landscape behind his carefully chosen words. She, in turn, told him about her life, about her dreams of being a graphic designer, a dream she'd had to put on hold when she got pregnant with Leo. She told him about Leo's father, a man who had panicked and vanished the moment she told him she was pregnant. She spoke of her exhaustion, her fears, and her fierce, all-consuming love for her son. He listened. He truly listened. He didn't offer solutions or platitudes. He just listened, his dark eyes filled with an empathy she never would have expected. He made her laugh with his dry, self-deprecating observations about the world he was so unfamiliar with, the simple pleasure of a hot dog from a street vendor, the chaos of a public playground. He was like an alien learning to be human, and she found herself charmed against her better judgment. One evening, he met her after her cleaning shift. He was waiting by the bus stop holding a single, perfect gardenia. "I know you're tired," he said, his voice soft. Allow me to drive you home." She was about to refuse, the old, reflexive defensiveness rising, but then she looked at his face. The hope there was so naked, so vulnerable, it disarmed her. "Okay," she said quietly. His car was not the flashy black sedan she had half expected. It was a discreet, dark gray Audi. The inside was silent and smelled of clean leather. It was a world away from the rattling, grimy city bus. During the drive, he was quiet. When they pulled up to her apartment building, he turned to her, his expression serious. "Maya," he began, his voice low, "there is more to my life than I have told you. Things that are difficult, dangerous." Her heart began to beat a little faster. She knew this was coming. She had been waiting for it, dreading it. "The complex family business." He nodded, his gaze unwavering. "My family. We are not in manufacturing or real estate, not in the way you would understand. We are the Golden Dragons. We deal in power, in influence, and sometimes that influence is enforced in ways that are outside the law. The Korean Mafia." The name Chloe had thrown around as a joke echoed in her mind. It wasn't a joke, it was real. The man sitting next to her, the man who had shown her such unexpected gentleness, was part of that world. The world of shadows and violence she saw in movies and read about in hushed, fearful news articles. "My father is the chairman," he continued, his voice tight, "and I am his heir. It is a legacy I was born into, not one I chose. But it is mine. It is a world of darkness, Maya, and I have tried so hard to keep it from touching you." She stared out the window at her shabby apartment building, at the flickering streetlights. This was the confession, the pivotal choice. Her mind raced, thinking of Leo asleep upstairs, her son, her bright, beautiful boy whose world she had fought so hard to keep safe and good. Could she bring this man, this darkness, into that world? Could she love a man who was a kingpin, a man whose wealth was built on fear and crime? "I am falling in love with you, Maya," he whispered, his voice thick with an emotion that felt raw and terrifyingly real. "I know I have no right. I know who I am, but I cannot help it. I want you." Tears pricked her eyes, tears of confusion and sorrow and a terrible, aching love that she had been trying so hard to deny, because she was falling in love with him too. She loved the gentle man who brought her coffee and listened to her dreams. But could she accept the other man, the heir to a criminal empire? "I can't," she whispered, the words tearing from her throat. It was the most painful thing she had ever had to say. "Jinwoo, I can't. I have my son to think about. I can't bring him into that. I can't bring myself into that." The pain that flashed across his face was so profound, it was like a physical blow. He didn't argue. He didn't try to persuade her. He just nodded slowly, his handsome face becoming a mask of stoic heartbreak. The kingpin was back, burying the vulnerable man she had come to love. "I understand," he said, his voice hollow. It was a lie. He didn't understand. How could he? His world was duty and power. Hers was safety and principle. They were incompatible. "This has to be goodbye," she said, her voice breaking. She opened the car door, desperate to escape the suffocating intimacy of the small space. "Maya," she paused, her hand on the door. "I would burn the world down for you," he said, his voice low and intense. "Remember that." She fled from the car without looking back, tears streaming down her face. The painful goodbye. It felt less like a clean break and more like tearing herself in two. She ran into her apartment, locked the door, and slid to the floor, sobbing, the scent of his gardenia filling the air around her like a beautiful, tragic ghost. The days that followed were a special kind of hell for Maya. The world had lost its color. The daily grind, once just a familiar burden, now felt like an unbearable weight. Every corner she turned, she half expected to see him. Every quiet, dark car that passed her on the street made her heart leap with a mixture of hope and fear. She was miserable. She missed him with an ache that was physical, a hollowness in her chest that never went away. Chloe tried to help. "You did the right thing," she'd say, her voice firm. "For you, for Leo. You can't build a life on that kind of foundation. It's quicksand." Maya knew she was right. "I know, I know." The words were a prayer and a curse. She knew, but her heart refused to accept it. She had touched something real with him, something profound, and now it was gone. She had chosen safety over love, and the safety felt like a prison. She tried to focus on Leo, pouring all her energy into him. They went to the park, the library, the free museum days. She tried to fill the emptiness inside her with his laughter, but at night, when he was asleep and the apartment was quiet, the loneliness would come rushing back in, vast and overwhelming. For Jinwoo, the world without Maya was not gray. It was black, a return to the familiar darkness, but now he was acutely aware of what he was missing: the light. He threw himself back into the family business with a cold, terrifying efficiency. He was harsher, quicker to judgment, his small reserves of mercy seemingly exhausted. He expanded territories, consolidated power, and crushed rivals with a ruthlessness that even made Min-jun, his loyal lieutenant, uneasy. "Sir," Min-jun said one night as they stood on the balcony of Jinwoo's penthouse, overlooking the glittering, indifferent city. "You are becoming more like your father." The words were a slap. Jinwoo turned, his eyes cold. "Is that a problem, Min-jun?" "It is not my place to say." "But the man who bought coffee in that diner for 3 days, he is gone. This is not what she would want." "She is not here," Jinwoo snapped, the words sharp as broken glass. "She made her choice." But Min-jun's words haunted him. He saw his reflection in the penthouse window, the severe suit, the cold expression, the emptiness in his eyes. He was becoming the very thing he had never wanted to be: a man trapped by his legacy, a king without a heart. He was haunted by her scent, her smile, the memory of her resilience. The misery of their separation was a constant, low-grade fever, a sickness of the soul. He had told her he would burn the world down for her, but he was only burning himself. The catalyst came, as it always did, from his father. Chairman Kwon summoned him to the family estate, a sprawling, traditional Korean house isolated in the hills outside the city. It was a place Jinwoo despised, full of silent servants and the ghosts of his lonely childhood. His father was practicing calligraphy in his study, the air thick with the smell of ink. He did not look up when Jinwoo entered. "The waitress," Chairman Kwon said, his brush moving with fluid precision across the rice paper. "You are still distracted by her." "She is no longer a part of my life," Jinwoo said, his voice flat. "Good." The brush stopped. The chairman looked up, his eyes like polished stones. "Because she and her son represent a weakness, a vulnerability. Attachments are liabilities in our world, Jinwoo. A lesson you seem unable to learn." A cold dread, familiar and sickening, coiled in Jinwoo's stomach. "What have you done?" "I merely had a conversation," his father said calmly. "I visited her. I introduced myself. It is important for such people to understand the ecosystem they inhabit, to understand who the predators are. She needed to understand that her proximity to you, however brief, has put her and her child on the map." "My map!" The blood roared in Jinwoo's ears. The memory of that scene, his father on the sidewalk looming over Maya and Leo, crashed over him. It hadn't been a chance encounter. It had been a threat, a calculated move to demonstrate his power, to show Jinwoo that nothing in his life was truly his own, not even his heartbreak. "You threatened her?" Jinwoo said, his voice dangerously low. "You threatened her child?" "I educated her," his father corrected smoothly, "and I am prepared to offer a more practical lesson should you continue to allow this sentimentality to affect your judgment. In that moment, something inside Jin Woo snapped. The years of resentment, of suffocating duty, of buried rage, all coalesced into a single clarifying point of fury. Maya had left him to protect her son from his world, and his father, in his infinite cruelty, had brought the world to her anyway. He had proven her right. This was it. The breaking point. He could not have both. He could not have her and this life. He could not protect her while he was still a prince of this dark kingdom. To save her, he had to destroy it, or at least his place in it. This was his grand gesture of change. Not a gift, not a promise. A war. "You will not touch them," Jin Woo said, the words an oath, a declaration of rebellion he had been waiting his entire life to make. "You will not go near them. You will not even think their names." His father laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You are not in a position to give me orders, boy." "No?" Jin Woo took a step forward. "Then let me make a statement. The Golden Dragons will be legitimized. I am cutting off the illegal enterprises, the smuggling, the extortion, the violence. It ends. Now. I will use every piece of leverage, every ally I have, every secret I know, including yours, to tear down the rotten parts of this organization and build something clean from the ashes." The chairman's face, for the first time Jin Woo could ever remember, showed a flicker of shock, quickly replaced by incandescent rage. "You would betray your family? Your blood? For a common woman?" "She is not common," Jin Woo said, his voice ringing with a conviction that shook the room. "She is the only thing that has ever been real in my entire life. And you are right. Attachments are liabilities, which is why I am detaching. From you. From this." He gestured around the room, at the empire of shadows his father had built. "This is no longer my legacy." He turned and walked out, leaving his father sputtering in impotent fury. The war had begun. The next few months were a blur of conflict and brutal negotiation for Jin Woo. He worked relentlessly, using his intimate knowledge of the organization's criminal workings to dismantle them from the inside. He made enemies. Vicious ones. There were attempts on his life, threats against his few loyalists, a full-scale shadow war fought in boardrooms and back alleys. He sold off assets tied to illegal activities, rerouting the money into legitimate investments, tech startups, green energy, real estate development. He was laundering his family's soul. He bled power. He lost allies. He was ostracized by the old guard. But slowly, painfully, he was winning. He was building something new, something that Maya could one day be a part of without sacrificing her principles, something that would be safe for a boy like Leo to be near. During this time, he kept his distance from her. It was the hardest thing he'd ever done. He had Minjun watch over her from afar, a silent, invisible guardian angel, ensuring no harm from his father's faction could reach her. But he did not contact her. He would not go back to her with promises. He would only go back to her with proof. He would go back to her a changed man, the master of a changed world. Maya had moved. After the encounter with Chairman Kwan, the fear had been too much. She'd broken her lease, packed up her and Leo's meager belongings, and moved to a small, quiet town 2 hours outside the city. She found a job at a local library and enrolled Leo in the neighborhood school. It was a simpler life, a safer life, but it was a lonely one. She told herself she was happy. She told herself she was free. But every night she dreamt of dark, intense eyes and a voice that promised to burn the world down for her. One crisp autumn afternoon, almost a year after she had fled, she was walking home from the library, holding Leo's hand. They were kicking through piles of red and gold leaves on the sidewalk. Leo was chattering happily about a book he'd read, and then she saw him. He was leaning against a tree across the street, watching them. He wasn't wearing an expensive suit or a threatening aura of power. He was in simple dark trousers and a gray wool coat. He looked tired, thinner, but his eyes, when they met hers across the street, held the same intensity, the same soul-deep longing. Her heart stopped. Then it started again, a wild, frantic drumming. Leo tugged on her hand. "Mommy, who's that man?" Maya couldn't speak. Jin-woo pushed himself off the tree and crossed the quiet street, his steps measured, hesitant. He stopped a few feet away from them, his gaze fixed on her face. "Maya," he said, his voice rough as if he hadn't used it in a long time. "What are you doing here?" she whispered. The old fear was there, a ghost in the back of her mind, but it was overshadowed by a tidal wave of emotion she couldn't name. "I came to give you this." He held out a thin portfolio. "It's the new charter for my company, Kwan Holdings. We're publicly traded now. All our interests are legitimate, the Golden Dragons. The old version, it's gone. I dismantled it. My father has been forced into retirement. He has no power anymore. He can't hurt you." She stared at him, unable to process the words. He had done it. He had actually done it. He had started a war. For her. "It's safe now," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I made it safe. For you. For Leo." He glanced down at the boy who was hiding shyly behind Maya's leg, and a soft, gentle smile touched Jin-woo's lips. Tears welled in Maya's eyes, spilling over and running down her cheeks. All the loneliness, all the heartache, all the secret, stubborn love she had held onto for a year, it all came pouring out. He took a hesitant step closer. "I never stopped loving you," he whispered. "Not for a second." "I know," she sobbed, a real smile breaking through her tears. "I know." She let go of Leo's hand and closed the distance between them. She threw her arms around his neck, and he caught her, his own arms wrapping around her waist, holding her as if he would never let go. And then he kissed her. The reunion kiss was not gentle. It was desperate. It was hungry. It was a year of pain and longing and misery poured into one single, soul-shattering moment. It was the end of their separation and the explosive, brilliant beginning of their future. It was a promise made and a promise kept. It tasted of autumn leaves and tears and redemption. When they finally broke apart, breathless and clinging to each other, he rested his forehead against hers. "I want you," he said, the words a familiar, beloved refrain. This time she did not say she couldn't. This time she did not run. "I want you too," she whispered, her voice full of certainty and love. "Come home, Jin-woo. Come home with us." He looked from her shining, tear-streaked face to the small, curious boy peeking out from behind her, and for the first time in his entire life, Jin-woo Kwon knew exactly what home was. The house they bought was not a mansion or a penthouse. It was a simple, lovely two-story home with a big backyard in the quiet town Maya had chosen as her sanctuary. It had a swing set, a small vegetable garden Maya was determined to cultivate, and a home office where she finally started her own freelance graphic design business, her first client being Kwan Holdings. Life was not a fairy tale. The shadows of Jin-woo's past were long. There were still old enemies, still threats that had to be managed by his small, loyal security team, now headed by a much more relaxed Min-jun. But the danger was no longer a part of their daily lives. It was a distant storm, managed and contained, far from the sunny world he was building with Maya and Leo. He learned the rhythms of a life he'd never known. He learned how to make pancakes on a Saturday morning, how to read a bedtime story with the right voices for all the characters, how to hold Maya at night without the fear that his darkness would consume her. He learned how to be a partner and how to be a father. Leo, at first shy and wary, slowly blossomed under Jin-woo's quiet, steady affection, eventually calling him Dad one afternoon while they were building a lopsided birdhouse, a moment that made Jin-woo's heart feel like it might burst. He had not burned the world down. He had rebuilt his small corner of it. He had traded an empire of fear for a kingdom of love contained within the four walls of their home. He had been a kingpin, a man defined by power and darkness. Now, he was simply Maya's husband and Leo's father. He was a redeemed man, made whole by a resilient heart that had been brave enough to wait for him. And he knew, with a certainty that was the bedrock of his new life, that it was the greatest trade he had ever made. This story teaches us that love's true power isn't just in acceptance, but in its ability to inspire profound change. It shows that no one is beyond redemption if they are willing to dismantle the world they know for the person they love. True strength isn't about holding on to power, but having the courage to let it go to build something better, something worthy of a pure and resilient heart. We really hope you enjoyed this educational piece of content and hope that you could understand the moral lessons behind it. If you enjoyed this story of love, sacrifice, and redemption, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content just like this. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update, and share this story with someone who loves a tale of second chances. Now, for our question of the day, when Maya first left Jinwoo, do you think she made the right decision for herself and her son, even though it caused them both so much pain? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And finally, we want to know what you'd like to see next. Should our next story focus on A. Min Jun, the loyal second-in-command as he finds an unexpected love of his own while protecting his boss's new family? B. Chloe, Maya's best friend, who accidentally gets involved with a rival of the new legitimate Kwan Holdings? Vote now in the comments. We can't wait to hear from you.